Welcome back to Ionia Health Tech, and we're here to introduce Alex Moy. Alex, introduce yourself and what you do.
Sure, thanks, David. My name is Alex Moy, and I help enterprise AI leaders with scaling and enabling AI with measurable ROI.
Gotcha. Tell me about your finance background. I saw that you had banking background and AI, and how did that merge into what you're doing now?
Yeah, so my background has been primarily in the finance world. So I've spent years in accounting and decade in the banking world, and then transitioned to more insurance focus and insure focus as well. And during my career, there's always been a need for understanding data, analyzing data. When we're in the corporate underwriting space, where I spent many years, I I realized that there was a need for it in that area, but because of the size of the organization, there was a lot of expertise on crunching numbers. So I became that subject matter expert, and then through a number of fortunate accidents, I you know, became involved in data science and business intelligence, led some of the data science functions, helped to lead some large scale automation projects, and then later on went on to build out our entire data science organization, as well as leading several of the large organizations in innovation technology and channel engineering as well.
Wow. You're in the filming industry now? That's what your LinkedIn profile says, right?
So not exactly the filming industry, but we had now had the opportunity to partner and build out several different companies.
Okay.
So we've developed a fund that trades using algorithms. We have a consulting agency that we work with enterprise companies and help them with AI enablement. And then we also launched an insurtech company that helps with performance management for independent agencies and captives. And we have also launched a podcast media brand, InsurTechs.io, that is really the community building and storytelling center of the InsurTech world. And so I have various partners in those spaces where we've been able to um, find a need and fill a gap in the marketplace.
That's awesome. In what ways has AI changed underwriting? Everyone goes through that process. No one loves the underwriting process. I know a lot of clients always have the issues with, oh, why do we have to go through this? Why does someone else have to look up my numbers and that kind of thing? Explain how AI will help with that underwriting process and make it quicker.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. It, I would say there's two sides to this. One is the banking side or the financial side when we talk about underwriting. And for those who aren't aware, AI in broad strokes has always been a part of that underwriting process, right? But we just called it data science or modeling. And so a lot of those techniques have always been there. And the important part about those models is that they were explainable, right? So you're able to explain to a regulator, this is why I made the decision. And that's really important that we have explainability so that there's no bias or discrimination, right? You don't want to have accept your neighbor got accepted and you didn't, but you guys look the same on paper. That would be a discriminatory practice right there, right? And so we want to be really, really careful of that in underwriting. And so understanding not just the regulatory landscape, but what's the right thing to do in terms of treating your customers. And so that part's really important. Now, when we talk about AI or like the chat GPTs of the world in that process, we would actually say that we want to avoid using that in the underwriting process itself because it could introduce bias, and it's what people call non-deterministic. So sometimes you put in one set of information, you get one set of results. Put the same information next time, you might get a different result. And so we want to be careful about using that in that underwriting process.
Gotcha.
Now, from the other side, from the consumer side, to speed up the underwriting process, I find it's actually a very helpful and useful tool, right? If you're getting a business loan and you've got to come up with a business plan that is a 20-page document, and you're a small business owner and you're not an MBA grad that knows how to write all these docs, now ChatGPT is your best friend, right? You say, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm doing it, this is how much I make, this is my goal to borrow X, and it will write up your entire business plan. And that's the powerful thing about AI on the consumer side that I think is so beneficial. And so it's how do we find the right use cases for technology?
What kind of prompts are we using AI to differentiate a small business from mid business to a large corporation these days? A lot of prompts we all use in our daily lives, we now have to distinguish between, is this human? Is this computerized? Or is this more of a combination? And typically I find it was a combination of both.
And so your question is around what type of prompt to use? Is that the
Correct. Yeah.
question?
What kind of prompts are we using in the underwriting process to, create a better, distinguishable system so we can, collect the data like you were saying, and then organize it in such a way that we can then have a historical basis, kind of like the stock market and whatnot.
Sure. And I would say that, again, on the banking or insurance side, I wouldn't recommend using AI per se to do underwriting. Right? That presents a lot of risk, and you'd have to be very careful about your guardrail design in order to use generative AI in that space. Um, that said, there's certainly a use case for gathering information around um, particular individuals. What an area that's actually quite useful is on the fraud determination side. So when you're doing underwriting, there are cases where the person who's applying for insurance is actually a fraudster, right? And they're trying to create some sort of policy so that they can claim and then do insurance fraud on the back end. And where generative AI and the LLMs are really, really powerful is that we can actually sift through hundreds and thousands of records, right? And use that to analyze and extract patterns of information. And what that allows us to do is essentially build a dossier around a potential fraud profile if it is alerted or triggered. And then that information is passed to investigator. And in the past, for an investigator to go and do that work in that manual research, it might take 5-6 hours of just compilation and searching. But now you can do that in 5-10 minutes. You can have that run in the background, and when it's ready, it goes straight to the investigator. And that's something that is a tremendous time savings, right? And so when we talk about how it's able to help these organizations, that's one of those really powerful use cases of being able to do a lot of deep research and aggregation of data. Is it perfect? No. But does it present a huge time saving in terms of collecting and aggregating data? Absolutely. And so it's a very, very powerful tool in our arsenal.
What do you see coming down next 10 years for the financial markets and whatnot with the AI?
So there's a saying, the future is here, it's just not distributed equally, right? And I think it's even more true when you talk about AI. There have been leaps and bounds made in the past 2.5 years since generative AI have come onto the scene, since ChatGPT made its debut. And I would say that where we are in just that short period of time, 2.5 years, is a drop in the bucket, has been revolutionary. And I would be really hesitant to try to predict where we'll be in 10 years from now. But what I am confident in is that the growth and adoption is not going to be evenly distributed. There are going to be some very, very risk averse organizations that are going to take their time. There are going to be a lot of organizations that have legacy systems and very old architecture, and it's going to take time to migrate it. And then there's also the people component, and there's a lot of change management that happens, right? And a lot of what I focus on when I'm working with organizations is helping them understand that AI isn't something that you just inject, push a button, and then let it go, and it's all of a sudden going to do the job of 1,000 or 5,000 people, right? We're seeing this in the technology space because a lot of those replacements are on the coding side, where AI is actually a really, really good labor force multiplier, right? Agentic coding. But when we go back into all of the rest of general business operations, and you talk about anything that might be custom flows, underwriting process, claims collections, all of those things are actually much better with human in the loop. And
Correct.
what do I mean by that is that you have so much institutional knowledge and expertise from those people that there are a lot of pieces of their job day to day that AI can help augment and support, and it makes them more efficient, right? So you can deliver a whole lot more with that same people force. And so it's all about how do you present AI in a way that is aligned with your people, and how do you build a culture where it's a tool and it is not something that is taking over the organization. And so that is, I think, where the future needs to move to. How do we align people with AI, upskill them so that they're not afraid of it coming in and taking their job? And it's really like any other technology, right? It requires people to adopt it and learn how to use it properly.
What are your thoughts about the layoffs like Google and IBM and such using AI? Is that going to be a trend, or is that just short term?
I think we've seen this type of pattern happen before, and I think some of it is blamed on AI, and it might very well be. There certainly is a use case for that. At the same time, some of that might be just where the market is today, right? We see on one side all the hyperscalers investing billions of dollars in the data centers, and on the flip side, we see inflation happening for everyday goods and services, right? And so it's really hard to tell what's happening in the economy truly in the U.S. side. And so when we look at all of those different dynamics happening, I think some of these people are hedging their bets that if they're going to pour all this capital into these AI projects, they also want to try to shrink their working capital needs, right, with all the headcounts, and then build back as they need to. That said, because of the power of the agentic coding tools nowadays, you got a lot of great engineers that are back on the market that I would say if you're a mid-sized enterprise company, this is a perfect time to go shopping for engineers. You bring a couple ex-Amazon, ex-Google, ex-Meta folks into your organization and they're equipped with agentic coding tools, you have a 10x, 100x engineer in your organization that can really leapfrog you ahead. And so I think there's actually a lot of opportunity for in the middle market in leveraging all the talent that's available. And I think you're also going to see a lot of startups come out of this space, right? Every time we've had a downturn, these really smart folks in the technology space find ways to innovate. And I don't think this will be any different.
What about wages of are the average person? Everyone's complaining about inflation. Everything keeps going up except for the wage or salary. So how do we rehumanize ourselves while using this AI technology in order to be able to afford all the lifestyles and whatnot? And look, I get there's Hollywood and reality, but we we live in between. So what can we do to create a better organization, a better economy that will allow both the lower income people to raise their standard of living while keeping their humanity and not having 15 trillionaires dictating our lives like Google, Apple, all the social media corporations? How do we avoid that?
That's a great question. I think that a lot of people are struggling with that question right now. And as technology has progressed, it is a force multiplier, right? So the folks that have small advantages, those become exponential advantages very, very quickly. AI is one of those force multipliers that does the same thing. That's a double-edged sword because the people that already are successful are able to compound that even more using the technology and by deploying it to hire some of the best talent. You see that with the $100 million salaries that some of these companies are offering to top engineers and top researchers in the AI field. Because to some extent it is a winner-take-all model when it comes to the technology world. And so that is a very real fear and concern that we need to address. But given or outside of the ability to affect change on that scale, I think more pragmatically for people that are just working everyday people to think about and consider is the first thing is would be AI is a reality. You cannot be an ostrich with your head in the sand. And so you as an individual have to take ownership and responsibility to say, hey, I want to learn how to use AI so that I can be more productive and add more value. It's about value creation at the end of the day, right? And so if you're able to deliver more value, you're able to get compensated for that value that you create. So that, to me, is very fundamental and foundational. And the access to this technology is so readily available that you can learn this. There are free courses by all the top technology companies. And so it's very readily accessible. People just have to take the time to do that. In terms of where industry goes in the future, I actually think there's going to be a great market for community-oriented and human-centric activities. Because when we get to this world where all digital labor is autonomous, then the real value is going to be in connection. And we have this huge issue with loneliness, right? There's a loneliness pandemic because we're so glued to and attached to our devices. So the question is, can we create more artisanal experiences that is now at a premium because all the digital labor is out there, right? And so I think there is a avenue to go into that. Somewhat aligned to that might be the trades and trade labor if you're looking for a career path where plumbing is in really high demand. General contracting and electricians is really high demand. There are a whole generation of people that are aging out that service that field. And so there's great opportunity that because houses are just continuing to age and they need repair and maintenance. If you do want to go on the technology side and you are a proponent on the AI front, I think there is still an opportunity to take your unique skill set or knowledge set and create your own agents and introduce that into the agent workforce. So one great site that's already working towards this is agents.ai, I believe. It's a branch off of what HubSpot has done. And they have this entire platform which allows creators to come and build AI agents that other people can use and deploy or businesses can employ. And so by creating your own agent, you're allowing your digital self to be out there to help other people do specific skills, purposes, and I would say capture that opportunity sooner than later so that you're injected into that ecosystem and you can deliver value and get compensated for that. So I think those are some of the opportunities in the marketplace.
Is there a possibility we can create an incubator to create more funding opportunities for startups that are maybe non-technical so that we can actually have more people know what value creation is? We are not taught in schools what value creation is. We are taught how to go to a job, clock in, do the job, get paid, but we're not taught how to create, how to value your time, your skill, your abilities other than, basic arithmetic language and, connection. Like you said, we have a loneliness epidemic, not only because we're working on devices or on cell phones, but because we don't communicate with each other in the way that we used to. Now, I'm pushing near 50. I remembered in 1990s when everyone thought internet was the greatest thing since sliced bread. 30 years now, we're realizing that yes, we have communication like we're doing today, which did not exist 20 years ago. What kind of things you think or want to contribute through your companies to better humanity?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. When I think about what we can do with our companies, there's several different avenues. So you touched on the incubator and value creation, and one of the organizations I'm involved is Junior Achievement, and their mission is that financial education and workforce ready enablement for grade school, K through 12. And so being in the classroom, participating, whether it's in a speaker forum or doing JA in the day, is powerful because those kids remember those experiences. And it might be the only time they have somebody that is not a family member introduce them to concepts around money and how to manage it. Right? So I think that is one thing that is really critical. Participating in activities and organizations like that. And I would encourage folks, if they have the opportunity, to do that. And here's the thing. When you do that, you actually learn a thing or two too, right? When you're teaching, you actually have to learn. And so it makes you better at your own financial management. It gets you more acclimated with those concepts. And so I think it's very powerful. You get just as much as you give when you participate in that. Now, one of the things that I do personally as well is we work with different organizations in our area, in our region, to do financial training around value creation. There's actually a topic that I speak on and teach on in the community and with different nonprofit organizations in our area. And so that's something I'm very, very passionate about. And I'm excited to talk about that because I do think, to your point, it's not discussed in schools. And I will also share that I've sat in classrooms, I've sat with in boardrooms, and I've sat with everybody in between. And when we talk about value creation or I'm consulting with an organization, and I say, okay, explain to me how you guys create value. What does your product do for the customer? They'll go on and list all these features. And then I'll ask them, okay, but what does that actually do for them? And they have a very hard time, articulating what that actually is, right? And so we're able to break it down very, very concretely across 3 dimensions of transformation and 4 dimensions of investments. And when you can take it so that even a 5th grader can understand it, it actually makes it practical and tangible. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate all these things. And at the core, it's, how are you helping the other person? Like, what are they getting out of it? And then what are they investing in it? What's the time? What's the effort? What's their level of certainty that they're going to get the result that you promise, right? The trust factor in there. And then there's the money part. And all things equal, we want to get a 10x return on investment, right? Value creation. And that would be fantastic. Oftentimes it's more like 3x, right? Think about why you would buy something at a Dollar Tree versus, a higher quality product at a Target or someplace else, right? And your willingness to buy stuff that might break next week at a Dollar Tree because it's only $1 or $1.25, whatever it is now, is because the cost is so low, right? So the value proposition is high that it could solve my problem, even if it's temporary. And so understanding those things allow you to view the world differently. And it allows you to view all your opportunities in front of you through a different lens. Yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, you're welcome to reach out and connect with me on my website. That's alexsmoy.com. And if there's organizations that are interested in AI enablement at scale, we have both delivery teams and consulting that can come in and support their organizations. And that's at datadoctoradvisory.com, datadoctoradvisory.com.
We would love to have you back and tell us what you've done in the past, in the future. Let us know what kind of projects maybe we can collaborate on. I have a financial wellness or creation seminar that we teach. It costs about $400.
Mm-hmm.
We spend about 8 weeks and we discuss how you spend your money. Not necessarily how to create a ledger and do the manual calculation, but why you spend it. Yeah. If you buy a cup of Starbucks, why do you go to Starbucks? Is it the coffee? Is it where is it located? To your job or to wherever or meeting? That kind of thing. Because if we associate good things or expensive things, it doesn't necessarily have to be expensive. It can be a cup of coffee that you take home that you bring in a nice thermos or whatnot. And someone would be really say, oh, where'd you get that thermos? Right? Not necessarily, oh, you're at Starbucks, so you must have a lot of money. Because spending $8 on coffee. It's more of discovering where your money goes, and also discovering how you interact with it. Because that's one thing that we don't teach in school. We teach, oh, here's a ledger, here's your expenses, here's your income, here's what you saved, here's what you have left. Oh, by the way, now you gotta do taxes. When is it applied? That kind of thing. So that's what we teach here, and we allow people to discover in their daily lives what you do with your money. Not necessarily how you spend it or how much you spend, because any accounting class can teach you that. We're teaching you how you interact with it. Because if people don't have positive interactions with money, they're always going to say, oh my God, everything is so expensive. Why can't I just get X for Y? You know, that kind of thing. So that's what we do here at Young Powers and Associates and People of Hand. If you'd be interested, let me know.
I love that. I think that's one of those activities that's so powerful. Something that I recommend with folks that are really entry level, right? They've never done a budget and they're still trying to figure out, like you said, how do I file taxes? What do I need to track to pay my bills? How do I keep track of my bank account and whatnot? And the first activity I tell anybody is don't create a budget. Don't try to track all your money and where you're spending it. It's too much, right? You have to tiptoe into the pool if you've never swam before, right? So don't just dive into the deep end. And I say get a Google Sheet or get a notepad or whatever you can use for note taking, and simply write down every day in this month, right? Just list out all the dates, and I say all I want you to do is log into your banking app every single day and write down your account balances. So if you have a checking account, write down your checking account balance. If you got a credit card attached to that, write down what your credit card is. And that's all I tell them to do. And I say, and if you feel like you need to make a comment or note, just write a comment or note next to that day. And without fail, after about doing this for 10 days, 14 days, typically around 2 weeks, they will come back and show me all the notes that they've made about what they observed about their spending habits without any prompting, right? It's literally just track one or two numbers every day. But simply monitoring, measuring, watching it changes your thinking, right? It makes you aware of how you're spending money. And I think that's what you're talking about, David. It's like it's such a powerful practice.
It's more the interaction that we're working with, right? There's, if you view money as every time I have to buy something, oh my God, where am I going to come up with X, Y, and Z? Or how much money do I have? Can I spend it on this right now? Do I need to use a credit card? Can I use my debit card? Do I have cash? And then we're going to get into Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
as far as investments, because that's all going to come into play as well as a form of payment. Discover has issues right now with Capital One, as far as being a bank, because they're switching over, Capital One switching over to Discover. Discover's not always accepted everywhere. American Express is having issues charging certain fees, and a lot of businesses are going to have issues with spending using American Express when they're going to have to pay the surcharges. So there's a lot of things that are coming onto today's financial markets where we never had to deal with. The merchants all had to deal with all the surcharges. Customer just said, "Here, here's my card." So it's a different type of fee, and people are going to get freaked out. Well, thank you for coming out. Would love to have you back. Just email us and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, David.
Now, have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Thanks, you too. Bye bye.